Alia.
Alia?
Uh-huh.
Alia.
Yeah.
Alia.
Yeah.
Alia.
Welcome to the Doctor's Mentor Show. If you believe that medicine is an industry and not a profession, if you enjoy submitting complex reimbursement claims, or you would do another residency just for fun, be advised, you're about to be offended. You should probably leave now.
All this talk about mentoring doctors is ridiculous. I thought doctors learned to do everything better than everyone else the first year of medical school. At least that's the way they act.
If you love assisting patients with vitality breakthroughs, if the right to practice medicine without interference is important, and you want expert tips for practice freedom and profits to support your epic life, welcome aboard and prepare to be blown away. The Doctor's Mentor Show starts now. Here's your host, Dr. Lori Barr.
Hi, it's Dr. Lori Barr, and I'm here with the amazing Alia Ott, who is one of the founders of Investors in Action. And Alia has been a specialist at making money multiply since she was very young. She's got a very compelling story that I think is very valuable for doctors because if you look at the statistics, doctors do two things poorly. Doctors do not manage cash flow in their businesses very well, and they don't build up any legacy. So when they get to retirement, they don't have a saleable business, and they don't have anything to live on when they get to retirement. So they're really good at trading their time for money and not putting anything away. They're like the ant instead of like the grasshopper. And Alia is amazing because she is an expert at building passive income with ease and flow for her clients. So I have invited her to speak to you about this very subject. So why don't you start, Alia, by telling us a little bit about how money became important to you?
Oh, thank you. Well, Lori, it's a great honor to be part of your show, and I want to share with everybody really a whole theory around cash flow today. So I'll start with my humble beginnings. I was an entrepreneur at a very young age, and I guess I just started thinking a little bit differently about money as a young child. My father was a retired military serviceman. And, I watched my parents struggle with money. However, they did some things that were a little bit different than most. So on a meager income, we were still able to travel. And part of that was because we owned real estate. And so that was my first inkling that real estate was a great investment to keep cash flow coming in, even if you had little to no income. Now, certainly somebody in the medical profession would probably have an income higher than most. But it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, we get to our retirement age or potentially even earlier, and some people just simply run out of money. They haven't set up the systems or the foundation that allows them to have cash flow coming in, whether they go to work or not. And I found that to be very, very important early on. So I started thinking about this. I was a goofy teenager that was looking at stock market and stuff when my friends were spending money at concerts and whatnot. But, it did take a little bit of time to figure it out because I didn't always do things the quote unquote right way. So I did a lot of trial and error, and I ended up coming upon self-storage investing, which has been amazing for helping build residual income and cash flow.
Today's topic:
legacy.
So today's episode, as you heard, is all about legacy. And remember, legacy is what happens with your creative, well, not even creative, it's your energy. You have energy that you bring into the world. And with that energy, you either create or you destroy things. And legacy is what's in your aftermath, the path you leave behind you as you exit this world. So let's talk a little bit about strategic legacy planning. And that's why you're such an attractive guest on this program, because I really, really believe that all doctors need a launch pad to legacy, and that starts with a strategic cornerstone. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So in planning for your legacy, part of that is the financial piece. That's a huge component of building that foundation for your long-term income. And a lot of times people go through, they either have a business or they work a job, but they don't necessarily think about their future retirement plans or what's going to come as income once they leave wherever they are. And why this is important is people typically have so many more ideas and things that they want to accomplish with their life. It's not just what they do in their 9 to 5, but it's what they do outside of that too. Really leaving a legacy, making an impact on this planet. And that's how I got so passionate about looking for cash flow investments, is because I have an understanding. Part of my background is philanthropy. So I came from the charity world and started investing. And then I kind of flipped that model on its head in reverse and started investing full time, where I could donate time, I could donate more money to the causes that I care about. In cash flow, building my portfolio of cash flowing investments, I'm able to then think about my legacy, because the more time I have freed up and the more money I have available to give, then I can really be a greater contribution to my community and society as a whole. And I think a lot of times people go to school and that conversation is left out of our typical education. They think about, what am I going to do for my 9 to 5? And have a family. But what happens beyond that? Even if you have a family, your main goal is just to simply provide for that family after you've passed on. If you don't have a financial foundation or cash flow coming in to help provide for their family, that income stops. So it's really important to think about, where are my investments? What am I investing in? Does it produce residual income or passive cash flow that allows me to provide for myself and my family if something dire happens?
So explain what self-storage is for somebody who may have never needed self-storage in their lives.
Sure. Well, as you can imagine, the whole world is supersized right now. People have boxes coming out of their garages, and a lot of times people are even looking at downsizing or moving, and they may temporarily need a place for their items to go while they're in transition. And so self-storage properties are essentially where people can put their stuff for a temporary period of time. Sometimes it's 2 months, sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it's even 20 years. It just depends on the person. Yeah. A lot of times people, they'll put in items with the intention of keeping it there for just a couple of months, and it ends up turning into a much longer period of time. So as the investor, that's great for us. It's just, that individual planning ahead for what their next move might be.
So, and self-storage units, these are the places that you rent. It's like a post office box, kind of, except you rent it for your stuff.
Exactly.
And some of them are quite sophisticated. Like, you can rent a self-storage unit for your wine collection, for example, that's temperature controlled. Or I have a friend who has her art studio in a self-storage unit, because that way her 5 kids don't get into all her creative stuff she works with. Right. And it's right the way she left it when she walks back in. Exactly. So that's been a good place for her to have quiet. There's nobody in a self-storage unit usually. Yep. So she's really enjoyed that.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of different classes of storage properties across the United States. Some are more humble and some are more sophisticated, like you said, the wine, or being able to run businesses out of that. And that all comes from innovation. So a long time ago, somebody just decided that they were going to put up these, I think they did it with cars in mind. They saw the need for people to store cars. Maybe service people were going overseas, or maybe just somebody had the need for an extra garage and they wanted to keep their items in storage, and it just grew. I mean, the first 20, 30 years of this business were kind of a slow start, but then once that idea of storage caught on, it doubled within a very quick period of time. So now, nationwide, most of these storage properties are at full capacity. And in many cities, they're not allowing investors to build more, which is why our strategy works so well, because we go in and buy existing properties.
So explain what your strategy is then.
Sure. So we specialize in looking for properties that are roughly 50 to 70% occupied, meaning there's room to fill up the property with more tenants. And many of these properties are owned by part-time investors, meaning they might have a full-time day job or looking at retirement, and they just simply haven't kept up with the strategies or the times. In particular, this one that we just closed on a couple days ago, it was a retiree, and the only form of marketing that he did was in the yellow pages. He didn't use online marketing tools whatsoever, which is where about 90% of people now search for a storage property if they weren't familiar with just driving by the property itself. So we work with U-Haul. U-Haul, of course, is the moving company, and they're allowed to put their trucks on our property. So not only do we leverage their name brand recognition, but we get potential tenants coming and going as they're moving in and out of houses as a potential customer to store their items. So that helps us out tremendously.
So why don't we talk a little bit about how a doctor could get started in self-storage investing?
Sure. There's basically two different ways. One is to do it yourself. And that takes some education and time to learn how to invest in self-storage and real estate properties. The other is to invest passively with somebody who already has an established business and maybe already a portfolio of properties that they're working with. So I'll address both. First, it's really important for somebody who's investing, especially in the size of property that we're talking about. This is a commercial property, meaning it's not your single family residence. It's a large property with multiple tenants, and it needs to be treated like a business, just as if, a doctor, for example, they may own or they may lease real estate from somebody who has many different offices in the overall practice or the building. It's the same kind of thing. You're owning a building and you're owning the manager, you're working with the managers who are running that property. So again, just going back to education, having a mentorship, somebody who's really willing to show you along the way. And that actually is one of the things that we do offer. Starting this coming spring, we're going to be sharing with people different techniques and ways that they can invest in self-storage and provide that education. For those who are more interested in becoming a passive investor, what that looks like is getting a solid return. Usually, if you're investing, it's paid out on a quarterly or monthly basis, either as a loan or as a partner in an established company. And somebody else does the work for you. And for most busy professionals, that's typically the direction that somebody might want to go, is to let someone else do all the hard work for them and leverage their years of experience, their different tools and techniques that they've systematized, and just sit back and get a nice passive return.
So the smaller play, the one with the least upfront investment, might be educating yourself and then thinking about self-storage as a real estate option for broadening your portfolio.
Right.
The medium-sized play would be getting involved with a service that identifies the properties for you, manages the properties for you, and you could serve in several roles. Is that what you just said?
We could help somebody who wants to passively invest, and we can also help educate people who want to learn how to invest in these and actually own their own property. When it comes to brokering, there's a special niche of brokers across the United States who only look at commercial and storage properties. So that's not something that we really do in terms of buying and selling, but we can help educate and make connections to people who want to get involved on an active basis.
And is there a bigger play for the people who are really looking to take their portfolio to the next level? For example, I know in real estate, and I don't know a lot about real estate. I know a little about real estate, but it seems to me, looking at real estate from the outside, that it's one thing to own your own home. It's another thing to own properties that you rent and either manage yourself or have somebody else manage. But the best thing seems to be the bank, to like be a lender for people. Is there a role for being the bank?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How does that work?
Well, we've worked with different individuals, so I could just explain the model of how somebody can get involved in quote unquote being the bank in real estate investing. You're essentially becoming a private lender. So you're looking for somebody who you like and trust, who has an established company that's looking to borrow money. Now, in the real estate arena, a lot of times, and I'll just use ourselves as an example, we might come with a few $100,000 to an opportunity, but that opportunity might cost several million. And so in order to complete that transaction, we either need to work with public banks, like your Banks of America, or with private investors who are willing to lend. And typically, those who are willing to lend make a higher rate of return than what the bank would charge. The reason why somebody would choose a private lender over a bank is actually for many reasons. A lot of times you need to act quick in real estate, and being able to successfully pull that money together is of a huge benefit to the individual investor. Also, too, sometimes it might require more of a down payment than the investor has liquid available, or they might be expanding their operations. So going back to the fix and flip model, that's how Terry and I got started. That's my business partner. We got started with lending. We knew the whole model of fixing and flipping properties, but we didn't want to swing the hammer anymore. So what we did was we put our money together as a partnership, and we went out and sought out people who were looking for properties that needed fixing and flipping. And those properties are not necessarily eligible for bank financing because they need repair. Or in our case with self-storage, they're lower occupancy. So we have to come in with private money in order to increase the occupancy. And then the bank will turn around in a couple of years and help us refinance that property out at a higher value.
Okay, that makes sense. So there's definitely a way that can be played too with the self-storage model or not.
Yeah, definitely. Really, with any niche in real estate, there's an opportunity for somebody to partner up and be the bank to an investor who's actively turning a property around, fixing and flipping a residential property, or taking a property like self-storage that has lower occupancy and helping it grow and build into, a much higher value property in the end.
And often I notice as physicians are looking at investments, it seems to me like the risk tolerance of physicians goes along with their personality, which tends to go along with their specialty sometimes. So your adrenaline junkie physicians usually are a little more risk tolerant than your nice old pediatricians and that sort of doctor who, is just the nicest person you've ever met in the world. So tell us a little bit about the difference between the risk in trying to do it yourself versus doing it in a structure like you're describing versus being the bank. What is the difference in risk, and what is the difference in expected rewards for those three models?
The three categories. Okay, sure. So for somebody who is looking at actively investing in real estate, meaning they're purchasing it and they are responsible for the success of the property, if they have a full-time practice or a full-time job, the risk factor could be fairly high depending on the type of property and the amount of expertise needed to turn that property around. Somebody who's looking for a very basic rental property and they've taken the time to educate themselves, they can do okay with that. Definitely when you're actively investing in real estate, the potential reward is quite high. Again, it goes back to how much you have an understanding of that particular type of business. If you really understand real estate and what to look for as far as a quality property, something that has a large opportunity, that's really important. And for us, again, using self-storage as an example, location is very important, as is the local market. So really having an understanding of all the factors that allow that property to be successful, or in some cases, why it has been historically unsuccessful with the current owner, that knowledge is really, really important in determining the success factor of that property. Then once you own it, your ability to manage people is also a critical factor, because more than likely you're going to have an on-site manager managing a larger property, or working with a property management company if you're doing single family rentals. And making sure that you're staying on top of your property managers and know how to manage that individual. It can be time consuming if you've never had that experience before, and making sure that your property is performing well. So that's owning it yourself. Being the bank, I think, is really one of the easiest strategies. So being the bank and then working with our model, it's very similar whether you're an equity partner or you're a lender in a commercial real estate transaction. Either way, you're putting up your money, which is a risk, and you're trusting somebody who has an experienced business to turn that property around. So you can manage your risk by making sure that you have either equitable interest in that property, and you've gotten a chance to know the individual who you're working with. I think that that's, the biggest critical factor really in the whole thing, is understanding what their track record looks like. Just the small signs. Do they do what they say they're going to do? And you can kind of test people out a little bit with that. And then getting referrals from other individuals who've had an opportunity to work with that person is also really critical. So, it's just like anything. It's like going to the doctor's office, right? You want to work with a doctor who really knows what they're doing, who follows through, who has good patient care, and, well educated. So just like you would look for a doctor, that's who you want to look for in your real estate partner.
And talking about looking for things in real estate, I think a lot of more conservative investors shy away from real estate because it does seem like there's a fair number of sharks. Even just in real estate education, you can spend a lot of money educating yourself and not have any cash flow from that experience.
Sure.
So what is a reasonable amount for a person who really doesn't know anything except they've successfully bought their own home? What's a reasonable amount of money to educate yourself with?
Well, I'll be honest, we've probably spent six figures in our education over time. Some have been greater than others. And what you can typically expect, here's what I would recommend. If you've never invested in real estate before, is to find your local real estate investment club and just go down and give them a visit and see who's speaking and ask them that very question. What is it that you want to learn? So there's so many different little niches in real estate. Having an idea of what your personality type is and how much time and money you have available to invest is also critical in choosing your path. So it's like, remember those old choose your own adventure books? You pick it up and you're like, okay, I'm going to learn how to be a private lender, or I'm going to learn how to fix and flip properties, or maybe invest in apartment complexes. So having an understanding of how much time and money you have available to invest is critical when determining which path to take. I have spent, hundreds, and I have spent thousands, and I have spent tens of thousands of dollars on various different courses. And really what I learned is finding something that I'm really interested in and showing up and actually doing the work. So it falls back on myself in order to take that valuable education, however much money I spent, and go apply it. And I have personally also found that those educational opportunities that are more interactive, that are more hands-on, are the ones where I particularly learn the most. We've modeled after one of our mentors. His name is Frank. And what I learned from Frank is he not only does the business, he teaches the business. So that's really critical too, because a lot of quote unquote gurus out there, they stopped investing in real estate a long time ago and they decided to get rich off of education. So those are the ones that you need to look out for and worry about. And also there's some big name companies out, which I will not name, but they are really geared around making money off of education. So I would say if you're looking for somebody to follow, make sure that they're making most of their money off of what it is that they're teaching versus just the teaching itself.
Right. And that's not to say that there aren't gurus who no longer make their money that way, who don't have valuable information to share. They may very well have information to share. The thing is, just like online activity is changing rapidly right now, real estate, as you mentioned, is locally very active in some places and locally dead in some places. So it's variable. It is a dynamic market, and information that might have been valuable in one location 5 years ago, while some of the general principles will apply, they may not be the most up-to-date things you can learn.
Right.
And on the flip side of that is some of the larger companies do actually farm out their coaching to coaching companies. They don't even have real estate people really teaching the material necessarily. It's a coaching company that's coaching you rather than true in the field investors in your local market. So I think your advice to get involved with your local real estate club is a good one. And how do you find those people? Is it meetups? I mean, I know that's how.
Yeah, meetup groups. Or you can Google search the name of your city and use the real estate investment club. Yeah, that's a good way to get started. Obviously, in my market, I know a number of those in Southern California that I can recommend that have provided me some invaluable education and contacts. So definitely, that's a great place to get involved. And just as you're there, meet people and ask really good questions of people. Inquire, who have you learned the most from? Who are your top 3 favorite mentors or educators that you've learned the real estate investing business from? What niches did they teach you? How did they teach you? So just asking the right questions, I think, can narrow down your path pretty quickly.
And then I'd like to flip the conversation just a little bit and go back to finding yourself not being successful in something that you've selected.
Sure.
So let's say that, like most doctors, you've decided to go off on your own, you've bought your own self-storage unit. What's the quickest way to realize you're going to fail? How do you fail fast so that you don't lose your tail?
Right. Well, I'm just thinking back to one of the experiences that I had when I first got started in investing. It was thankfully a smaller project. It was a fix and flip property. But we jumped into it and we bought it without, again, the education. I'm not really trying to harp on this point, but I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yep.
And so I went to an investment seminar and they were pitching all kinds of properties. And I just said, okay, well, we're going to buy that one right there without enough due diligence in the process of figuring out, is that really a good property or not? I didn't know that you could buy things at discounts. I didn't know that you could buy things from people called wholesalers who get properties at lower prices and then turn around. They make a fee for putting that property under contract, and then they sell the contract essentially. So we just bought something straight from a broker, full price. We went into a specific market and said, we want to buy something in this city and give us your top 10 properties. Due diligence is really, really important, especially when it comes to commercial property. So if somebody who's listening is thinking about buying a self-storage property, due diligence is key. And I can't go into all the details of what to look for on this brief call, but there really is an extensive list of things to look out for, making sure that the seller actually owns the property, to verifying that the data that they're providing you, such as the rent rolls, is accurate. And 9 times out of 10, it's not 100% accurate, but you find that out through your due diligence process of doing the numbers and walking the property and making sure that things are really up to snuff. Sometimes you find that the property is worth more than it's for sale for, and sometimes it's just the opposite. So that's really imperative. Also, doing an appraisal, I think, is really important when you're looking at a property, especially for the first time. Your appraiser is going to be able to potentially see things that you might not see. Same thing with having a contractor or a professional in that industry go out and survey the property and find what's wrong with it. Those are all key things that you would need to do.
Okay, so that's before the sale.
Mm-hmm.
But you bought that property.
Yeah.
And then how long did it take you to figure out it wasn't going to work? And then how'd you get out of it?
How did I get out? We ended up selling it for a loss. we bought it in 2006, and we saw the writing on the wall of what was about to happen in 2008. Things were slowing down significantly. It was in an area that had an auto plant that was laying off people. And so we just recognized that this wasn't for us, and we just needed to exit. And again, sometimes taking your lumps, like taking a small loss on the property. I don't know. We probably lost like 8,000 to 10,000. So it pinched, but it wasn't a substantial loss. People lose millions sometimes in real estate. And so they get themselves in over their head before they're ready to run. Yeah. And recognizing that this property isn't going to perform as well as you thought, it's okay. It's part of the learning process, but some people learn by doing, some people learn by getting mentored. Either way, you're going to figure it out.
You're going to learn.
And I learn by doing both. I get some information and then I go apply it, and I get some more information, then I go apply it. So over time, that education, that knowledge builds and builds, and then you can make better choices and decisions.
Right. I think, it is almost like when you find out that you have a health challenge that isn't going away,
right.
Either a chronic disease like seizures or diabetes or even cancer. There's a period of denial,
mm-hmm.
or there's a period where you think things are going to magically get better, and you just are not facing the facts. So are there any quick tricks to making sure you're not delusional?
I would recommend, if you're looking at buying a property, is you really triple ask. Get some knowledgeable people to look over the deal for you and give their analysis of the situation. They might come up with some strategies or ideas to take an okay deal and make it great. Or they might see some pitfalls in it that you're not seeing, especially for the first time. So I would always just do as much homework and due diligence in that part of the process as possible, so that you're not stuck with something that's going to sting you in the long run. And also, another part that's really important is recognizing market cycles. You can look like a genius if you were buying property in 2005, 2006 and flipping them, because all you had to do was buy it, hold it for a few months. The property market, values were going up 10% a year. And you could look like an absolute genius. But if you bought in 2008 and tried to sell in 2009, you could look really dumb. So market timing is also really important. And you can do great in down markets. You just have to be a little bit more cautious and careful. Part of the reason why we chose this particular strategy is because self-storage is a little bit more market resistant. When the market overall is bad, the economy is bad, people still have to move, which means people are downsizing and they're not willing to give up their items, but they may not fit in their new place of living. They might be temporarily living with a friend and they don't have anywhere to put their living room and kitchen, dining room furniture. So they'll put it in storage. So that's why through market and economic cycles, self-storage does typically better than most other types of commercial properties.
Okay, so we're going to take a time out here, and
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to you frankly as the doctor's mentor. If you are too busy to not even pay attention to the cycles within the field of medicine, the market cycles, do not delude yourself into thinking that you have time to become a master at the market cycles in another area, even if it's really interesting to you right now. Take the time to either hire a consultant before you seal the deal or get involved in a structured program that either educates you or provides you an easy way to deposit your money into the hands of someone you can trust and who will make money for you. Just my 2 cents as the doctor's mentor.
A lot of people in 2008 lost their job somewhere around that time frame, and many people struggled. But those who had a foundation of bringing in passive income, they were taken care of. And luckily, I was in a situation where I had started to build that when it came time to leave my job. And so I was able to more freely make decisions without desperation. or, worrying about, going on unemployment or going and seeking out Social Security as a means to the end. So definitely for anybody who's listening to this program is thinking about their future, financial future, and asking themselves the question, is what you have in your bank account, is it enough to get you by for a period of time or even the rest of your life? And if it's not, are you willing to step up and think about what to do as a next step to build your income streams?
Right. And just remembering whatever's in your bank account right now is not a reflection of your potential to earn. It is simply a reflection of what you've done to date. And most of what you've done to date is go to school and learn how to be a doctor. So you haven't put a lot of time into strategically thinking about how can I amplify the three currencies that I have control over. That would be your money, your power or influence, and your time. Those are the three things every human being has to trade in equal portion. Some are better at trading them than others. We barter these things to be successful in life. And what Alia is bringing to our attention here is, if you think about it on the front end, then when there are lean times, like the stock market crash originally, or what happened in 2008, or the Great Depression, or some giant cataclysmic war, and we're all living in caves again, if you understand what your currencies are, and if you've put some stuff in some kind of a bank, even if it's just an emotional bank, if we're talking about power or influence, that's going to serve you well over time.
Absolutely.
Gives you more flexibility.
It gives you freedom. That's ultimately, at the end of the day, I know it's kind of a word that's overused too often, is financial freedom. But I can't really emphasize it enough, because it allows you to have good choices. When economic times hit you hard, you're still allowed to have choices if you have that all planned ahead.
And just being able to make a decision not in desperation is huge. I mean, think about it in the operating room or in the ER is a good example. How many times are you rushing through a consent because the patient's bleeding out and a decision has to be made? And, nobody wants to have their foot cut off, say, for example. But if it has to be done to save the life, it has to be done. And your job is to then convince the person that that's the right thing to do at the time. That's a decision out of desperation, a critically desperate situation. It feels, your body handles that stress the same way, whether it's financial desperation or physical desperation, because our systems are just wired that way. When you make a financial decision out of desperation, you are the one who winds up on the losing end of that deal.
Typically, right. It's oftentimes desperate people that investors are purchasing properties from. They got themselves into a situation, whether it's divorce, financial stress, maybe it was a medical challenge that caused them to be where they are, and they have to sell like today. So their only option is the person that's going to have cash available and it's going to be purchased at a discount. So it's something you want to be on the preventative side. It's just like preventative health care, right? You want to be thinking ahead about challenging times. And as long as you've created that little nest egg or something that's producing a little bit of extra income for you, you're going to weather the storm a lot easier.
Your next step.
Thank you for being the wonderful cash flow diva that you are. And how would people find out more if they want to know more about what you have to offer, either in Investors in Action or in anything else they may want to tap your brain about?
Sure. Well, they can definitely go to investorsinaction.com and get in touch with us. The phone number and the email form on there all goes back to either myself or Terry. So we're very accessible and we respond to people that reach out to us. And they can learn a little bit more about our lending program there. We don't have specifics of our fund because it is regulated by the SEC, so we have to be very careful about publicly sharing that information. But in general, we have a lot of great information about education too. We're going to be launching our training classes on self-storage here.
And so if you would like to be considered as one of her beta testers for her educational program, definitely get in touch with her, tell her you're serious, show her your money, and talk a deal.
Perfect.
Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
There's more to explore at thedoctorsmentor.com.
Are you stopping at a hospital? Hello? Don't you know that hospitals are one of the sickest places on the planet? Don't touch anything in there and get out as fast as you can.